going to go through a few, though.
Do them quick.
I will. There were probably a few people in the audience that were scratching their head, Frank, when they heard a Pritzker winner talking about the importance of the elimination of change orders.
Yeah.
And Dennis, the technology, talking about the importance of mysticism. I would like to probe a little bit, if you could talk a little bit about the process, the design process, and has there been an emergence of a feedback loop between, the design, the technology? I mean, you sort of alluded to that, Dennis, in some of the forms you were showing at the end, but can you talk a little bit about that, and is that evolving for you? I think you're talking in jest, Frank, when you say you're afraid the computer's going to eat you up. But is there a feedback loop going on?
Well, I'm probably gotten lazy, so I rely on him. And I assume they're going to get it right because they always do. And so it gives you an opportunity to float a little freer, right? Because I think when an architect is hired to do a building, you have a responsibility to a client, you have a responsibility to a place and a time, and it has budgets, and it has realities, and those of us who practice know that constraints aren't necessarily bad. Sometimes they're impossible, but usually you make something out of it, out of the problem. It's just, I didn't ever want to give up. I always saw that if you could explain things clearly enough to somebody that was going to build it, and I use the word demystify, it's the best word I've ever found for it. It does enable them to give you, to react with real involvement and real financial responsibility for what they're going to do. And so I've come to rely on it because, in Europe, you do the quantity survey on all, and buildings are bid with quantity surveyors. And here we have the quantity survey intrinsic in this. You can take off the exact square footage of raw material, the number of bolts and screws and fasteners, and you can analyze the construction technique, and you can enable some of the things that we've done. And so it does sort of it has given me license, and I don't sit and talk to these guys very much, but I know they're there, and I know it happens, and the projects I couldn't show you, that the feedback from clients, and now that we've got this thing really going, is extraordinary. I have people call me and lavish so much praise, I don't know what to say to them. I mean, and it's not necessarily about the design, it's about the process of getting it there.
But Frank, if we could step back, before the digital model may be fully developed, back when you're in the real design process, is there more of a feedback loop with technology now than there was 10 years ago? Are you learning more about the design process as that unfolds, the creative side?
Well, I've learned that the construction industry can build anything if they want to, and if you can show them precisely, that they'll get on board and support it and make it with pride. Yeah. I think that's what's going on. I don't know. Is that right?
Well, certainly we are trying. I think both Frank and I always see the whole more than the glass half empty. But so I always worry that the information we're giving back is sort of polluting the process or taking on a life of its own. But I think, yeah, the ability, I mean, I shouldn't speak for Frank, but I know his process is very flexible. And if we can give good information back to him about cost or square footage, then he'll use that information, right? You know, and then, you know, on maybe a little bit deeper in, I mean, some of the projects, again, the relationship between very detailed, you know, again, the nuts and bolts and how these, you know, pieces come together, they all read in the project. So if we can bring that level of knowledge of how this thing is going to look and feel, you know, as part of the tools that these guys have available to work with, then you get just a much more, I think there's just a much richer potential for these guys to understand what it is they're trying to design. And
Dennis, as the technology guy and the PhD, how much of the power of technology or the computer are we using right now?
Well, I mean, we're using as much as we have, but I think, you know, I think that we're just repeating something we talked about this afternoon. I think we're now starting to scratch the surface in the sense that this idea that technology is becoming much more a part of the design and building process than it has been in the past. Okay. And there's a sort of a leveler playing field where we have more partners that we can work with. I think that's one of the things we've tried to do in making this technology available, is just to raise the amount of the potential partners we can work with. And so there's a general sense now that there's a different way of working, but at the same time, I think that playing field is just setting the stage for, again, a whole host of innovations that are technological and also process and design that we haven't seen yet. So I think we're just starting.
But I take I'll take the study models, the first study models, and analyze the surface area. We digitize it.
Yep.
Analyze the surface area. I know the volume, surface area, and floor area, and I can pretty much predict the costs of the project. And I know that if those are out of whack, the budgets, we're going to be in trouble. So I use those studies up front to control what I'm doing. So I control the volume, control the surface, control the floor area within the budgetary constraints. And so I use it, that frees me up to lock in earlier on what I'm doing. And it is a mystical thing, you know, because you don't know where you're going. I don't know where I'm going. I've said a million times, if I knew where I was going to go, I wouldn't do it. So it's hard to explain to anybody. The other thing is that I don't like the images in the computer. I alluded to it before. So when I go talk to his guys, they have a disease. They do this, and they're always twisting, and I go crazy and run away from them. I can't get them to hold an image still. They're fascinated with the dial, you know.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
And I don't like the dream image. What I'm thinking about doesn't look so good when they put it on the screen. Yeah. And so I shy away from that personally. But I teach at Yale and places, and the kids are now using it. They're more directly in it. And I think you're going to see Greg Lynn, Zaha Hadid, the younger architects coming up. And we've trained them with Dennis and his team. We went to England and trained Zaha because she was using, so I've sort of shared it with my friends. This became a thing I wanted to do. And, but they know how to play more directly than I do. So I think that's the future. I think the future will be paperless.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I remember 1999 to 2001, which is actually, you know, not that, I wasn't at Frank's that long. And there was a sort of sort of belief I felt like that the physical world was sort of eroding, and it was sort of, you know, second order, kind of not as sexy as. Funny thing is, the physical world is still really important, and I don't, and it's a great user interface. And you know, I think you know, we have the guys from Dassault that come to us and they look at what Frank does and they say, you know, oh, you know, why are you still using those blocks? Like, you know, why don't you just use our tools? And I think that's wrong. I think that it's much more intriguing and much more interesting to see the relationship, the synergies between hands and physical materials and these high-tech things, and to see that as sort of a comprehensive system rather than saying, oh, we don't need, you know, we can do everything on the screen. And I think, you know, again, maybe I've been, you know, sort of maybe corrupted by Frank, but I think brainwashed. Thank you. I think it's really important as architects to make sure that you do get out of the box sometimes, and you do.
You know, actually, I don't know, when that fish sculpture in Barcelona, those images were made by Bill Mitchell at MIT with his students. Yeah. And Bill was coming to me and trying to get me to use the computer for rendering. And I hated it. And he made a bunch of images of buildings, and I rejected everything except that one nice picture, which he got through to me. It was one. But we never do those kind of renderings for clients. We don't use it for that.
Yeah. Let's touch on another one. About 4 years ago, you created Gehry Technologies as a separate business unit, and you've talked about, you know, to get out there and to help.
You know why?
Well, tell us why.
Because it was, I mean, I got so deep into it, and it was very hard to carry it as a financial thing. The cost to me personally, to the partnership, were really enormous. And we tried to develop a strategy so that it was separate billings, and which, because it was an additional service to what normally architects do. I think probably everybody does that now, but I'm not sure. I think they do. So the easiest thing was to create this separate entity, and since I didn't know enough to run it personally, manage it in any way, I turned it over to the guys. I'm still the chief what? Chairman. I'm chairman.
But you're out there now, educating what one might say are some of your competitors.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah,
I
do you like that?
Serves them right.
Dennis and Frank, what new talent have you had to bring into the organization? Not only at Technologies, but also in the core Gehry partners. Are the new talent?
So certainly on the technology side, you know, we have brought a lot of really bright young architectural technologists in. We have tried to bring in engineers and contractors and project management folk as well, and then of course it turns out that technology companies actually need people that can run companies, and so we've had to bring a couple of those people in as well. But yeah, I think if you look at and we have proper software developers, so it's really quite an interesting bunch of nuts.
Mm-hmm. This industry doesn't change fast. I mean, you certainly are pushing and showing that the incredible benefits, and on many levels, of what this does. What's going to be necessary to really change this industry? What do you see unfolding?
Well, I think the aircraft industry has shown us that they can build these things paperless. And they even build them without models. They go directly into production now. And that's worth looking at. I would hope that the approval process would become part of this, so that the bureaucracy would have the software and would read the plans as we were going. They can easily take off as Dennis was showing you, the fire protection routes and all of the structural issues and all of the things that they're interested in 3D, and they can see it much better than going through 600 drawings in 2D and trying to figure out a building of like the complexity of a Disney Hall. I think that the cost savings that even the clients that Dennis has that are not people, not buildings we're not doing with other architects, are experiencing huge savings in elimination of change orders and things like that. I mean, they've got a whole list of things, and they've got him doing depreciation schedules for equipment, and they're going into maintenance games with after the building is finished. So he's into a whole bunch of stuff that I never thought I'd get. And it's not even stuff I personally want to get into. But
when do you think this will become the norm?
I may be out of the loop with the construction industry and with the broad construction industry, but I see change happening very, very quickly now. You know, the difference between, the first 5 years that I was with Frank, we would have these kind of sessions and people would go away and they say, well, okay, so Frank's buildings look like airplanes, so this must be appropriate for airplanes, but we do buildings like this, so we're fine, right? And I hope that the professionals in this room will second that things are changing. And I think there's a bit of a tipping point that really is in some ways about economics or the availability of these tools. There's a lot of bright kids that are coming out that are a lot smarter than any of the people that I went to school with. And so it's becoming cheaper on that side. The equipment's becoming cheaper and more broad. So I think change is happening now. I think it's happening very quickly, and I think we're getting to the point where if you don't change, you're going to be you have to change.
one thing that Dennis and Jim Glimpf, who was with us from the beginning, is retired now, but what they did, which was very intelligent, I thought. I didn't at the time they started doing it, but I thought it was going to cost a lot of money to do. But they they enlisted 40 schools or something like that around the country and developed programs in the schools. And that's working out great now because we have a pool of talent that understands how to use it. So architects that come to work in our office are trained immediately on how to use this stuff. Yeah. They haven't trained me yet, but for my 90th birthday, they're going to do it. But
one of the really interesting shifts that happened about 7 years ago was, before then we would hire aerospace engineers to come in and do the modeling, and the young architects didn't want anything to do with those guys, right? They were just in the corner, and they wanted to work with Frank and the designers, and they want to stay away from that stuff. And, really over the last, about 7 years ago, people got that, this is a great way to learn how a building goes together, right? Because the kids who are, used to do bathroom layouts got to virtually build, the concrete system or the steel system. And so there's been a real shift of just interest and
it's seductive, too, because we're having young designers coming to work in the office who, after they're there a couple of years, are asking if they can go work in his section.
Oh, interesting. Well, coming down the home stretch, so it's a couple of points to see if you'd like to follow up on. One is, where are you going? Where do you want to go?
To heaven.
Okay. All right. All right. Well done. But what are you trying to push? And the other thing is, if there's a lot of young folks in the audience, if you're asked for advice all the time, what are some of the things you would say for the young folks to be thinking about? as they look at this industry?
Well, I would say that this topic is inevitable. It's
Inevitable.
They have to get into it.
Yep.
From a design standpoint, the coming generations have to figure out how to get the humanity and passion and feeling of a design into the building using this tool. Now, right now it's difficult because you're playing with images that are dried out and lifeless. And it takes hours and hours and hours to put the information in. A friend of mine did Piero della Francesca murals in Arezzo, and her team took 7 years to get the amount of detail needed to represent a Piero del Francesco painting so it looked like, and it still didn't. It still had, still wasn't. So that's the issue. How do you do that? And I think they're going to learn to think differently than I do. They're going to learn to, they're doing it. And it's going to be a different kind of thought process.
I would just say that it's, for a person just starting out, it's an incredible time. I think, the design and building professions have never, it's in my relatively short experience, I've never seen the potential for innovation on all fronts, and the demand and market for young people who are pursuing innovation, and the building industry is changing so quickly that we really have to rely on the young people to help us figure these things out. And it's just a great time to practice.
But the great thing is to be able to sit in a room with the construction people, with people like Turner, with people like whatever big firm, and feel like you're a partner at the table. The construction guy isn't saying, "Hey, stop this nonsense. We can't build this shit for anything," which we used to get. We got it. We got it a lot, and it disarmed the clients. It made them feel insecure, and now this partnership, because of the tool, and there's lots of different ways to use it. We're not the only ones, and there are other systems, and we don't only use one. We use quite a few, I think, and we're always exploring the ways to use it. But.
Great. Well, listen, on behalf of the Building Museum, as well as the Turner Prize jury, we thank you very, very much for being this year's recipients, Frank and Dennis, and thank you very much for the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Let's go. Yeah.
Please join me again in thanking Norbert for doing such a terrific job, and Dennis and Frank. Thank you so much. It was a great program. I want to thank you all again for being here, and I'm going to close this evening's program by revealing to you an extraordinary coincidence. It turns out that our museum shop back there happens to have a lot of Gehry-related books for sale. And here's the amazing fact. The store is actually going to be open until 8:30 this evening, so you can go in and buy your own personal copies of Frank Gehry books. Thank you very much for being here, and come back for the next